Hello, everyone. Jill Rowetter here. I'm one of your district COVID resource nurses. In this video, I'm going to go through in more detail the illness surveillance process that we talked about on Friday. Along with this video, you should receive a copy of the spreadsheet as well as a Google Doc walking through it step by step. So let's open those up and go through this together. So as you can see here, I have the spreadsheet, and in order to integrate this into your health log, you're going to want to go down to the bottom here where it says new COVID and right click. You're going to go up to copy to and select existing spreadsheet. This will pull up your Google Drive, and you can go into your school and select your health room. And once you select that, it will be in your health log. Now, we're going to use the step-by-step and go through some scenarios in which you would be putting some kids on this sheet and utilizing this process. There has been a big recent change in the verbiage that we're going to use with parents in the letter. So the COVID parent symptom letter, there is a link to that in the step-by-step, and you are going to all want to look at that line by line as that process has changed a little bit to reflect 48 hours of symptoms instead of day 3. So we are going to try to train ourselves to switch that verbiage. And if you would look through that letter line by line at after 48 hours of symptoms, we're going to ask them to either test, do a voluntary 10-day quarantine, or if they're not feeling it's COVID related, then they could reach out to their doc as well. So all of the verbiage in there is going to reflect that, and we are going to want to have our principals send that out in a messenger, that letter, just one time so that we can kind of reset the community and the parents' mindsets moving forward. So let's talk about the scenarios. So scenario 1 is going to be absences due to illness. Now you can see here that the spreadsheet has different colors here, and the step-by-step is color-coded to match the spreadsheet. So the yellow columns are designated for the attendance secretary, green for the health aide, blue for the district RN, and pink for high school student use. And we will get there. That is the attendant use. There are some schools that have a different system in which the health aide might be doing part of the attendance secretary part, and that is fine. So in scenario 1, the attendance secretary is going to come into the spreadsheet once a day, as early in the day as possible is best, and fill in only the yellow columns for any of the students who have been called in sick on day 1 only. So they don't need to repeatedly do it for repeated absences, just day 1. So you can see here that on 2/1, Brad Pitt was called in. We clicked off the attendance line, name of person reporting it, of course that's April, and the symptoms reported sore throat. Staff initials were done there. Next line, Star-Lord, attendance line, called in by Groot, parent just stated not feeling well, and they initial. And that is all that the attendance secretary has to do once a day. The health aide will come back through once a day and go ahead and email that letter, the COVID parent symptom letter, to each of the families that were called in sick. So once they do that communication, they want to document that in the campus contact log and then come over here and check off that the letter was sent. The next thing that they want to do is they want to set that 48 hours past when symptoms started. So generally that is going to end up looking like that day 3, but sometimes perhaps not. If we know that the symptoms started in the morning, it might be really 2 full days. But I've put 2/3 for these 2 kiddos as their symptoms are starting, and they have until 2/3 to come back to school without symptoms. So the health aide will kind of set those days. And then the other thing the health aide will do is once a day, they need to come through and check for attendance for the students that are on that 48 hours of symptoms or day 3. So let's say today is the 3rd. They would go through and look those kiddos up on campus or run an attendance report, whichever works best for them, and see if those kids have returned to school. So it looks like Brad Pitt came back the very next day, symptom-free, we're all good there. So that kiddo is cleared to return. If we have a blank here, we know that that child has not returned to school. So when the RN comes into this spreadsheet, they can see who that they need to call. So scenario 2 is going to be students that are in the medical safe room due to an illness during the school day. So you can see on lines 5 and 6 here, those are kids that were in the COVID room. So we are going to fill this out. Some of these columns are exactly the way they stand right now with the COVID room log. So we just want to make sure we fill in that information, check off that it's the MSR. And then if that kiddo goes home, we're going to document all of that. When a kid goes home in person, the health aide is going to hand them that COVID symptom letter in person so they can check off that letter is sent as well. They also want to set that day 3 or 48 hours of symptoms for that kiddo as well. I put an example in here on line 6. So Lady Gaga went into the MSR with a runny nose, and we look to see in campus, we look up those kids, ones that we don't know, and it looks like that student has a campus flag for allergies. And a runny nose is a typical symptom for that student per the doctor's note that's in there, or the RN notes that's under that condition. And so per RN, that student went back to class. So that's another situation that you might see. So we checked off back to class, but it always is good to record that because you could see maybe the next day she goes home sick, and we can kind of track those symptoms back a little farther if there is an issue there. And then scenario 3, we have quarantine students. So when you are notified, the school or health aide or nurse is notified of a student that needs to quarantine, we are going to use the quarantine column. So I'm going to move over here. We put Bradley Cooper, we put the kid's name here, and then we are going to utilize these quarantine columns. So we're just going to put the reason, exposure to positive family member, when the student began quarantining, and the return date. Now, sometimes it's the attendance secretary or health aide that have collected this information. So it's important that the nurse do a little bit of follow-up. We may need to contact that family and make sure that those return dates are appropriate. Sometimes they're told a different date by their doctor or the health department than what we utilize in Jeffco. So that one is done there. And then the next scenario we might come across is on line 8 here. We have Cruella de Vil. We find out that that student is positive. So in that situation, we're going to come over here. We can put the date that they tested positive here, when their isolation date starts, and the end date or release date back to school. Now, again, we know as RNs that this is a little bit more follow-up. We certainly need to contact that family and collect the correct information and fill out the student positive form, but we can put that in here. I also am utilizing this if you have a cohort that is affected and the whole cohort is quarantined due to possibly like this positive case, then I list all those students in that cohort on this list as well under quarantine, and it keeps everything all in one area. So the RN review column is something that the RN can come in here on a frequent basis and check to make sure the entries are appropriate. So we can use teaching moments or just make sure that we're doing the right thing for the protocol and sign off here. And then we also have a pink section that's at the end. If you don't have a high school, you can delete these. This is for the nurse and athletic trainer to utilize. So we want to make sure the athletic trainer has access to this spreadsheet in order to do the return to play protocol for CHASA or club sports. So that area can be utilized there. So we are hoping that this spreadsheet and this process kind of streamlines putting some of the nurse work onto the health aides and having them help out. You know, nurses, as far as illness surveillance, just need to come in here and call your 48 hours of symptoms or day 3 kiddos, and then follow up with anybody that has been positive or coming back. And then, of course, if we have any positives, we're going to fill out the student positive form. So also in this email is a link to the return to play protocol, which is what we are utilizing this process under those guidelines. So if you need to dig deeper, if you have questions, we can utilize that resource. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this video. And if you can pass this knowledge on to the people on your teams, we can get this going. Thanks so much.